In today's lesson, we're going to learn to write trigonometric ratios. And that's just a fancy way of saying we're going to write some fractions today. All right? Fractions obviously have a numerator and a denominator. So what we're going to be doing today is we're going to be looking at a right triangle. We're going to pick two of the sides and we're going to make a fraction out of them. And you might not understand why. Of course, you're not going to understand why today, but in our next class, I'll tell you why we're going to be making these fractions. But for today, let's just focus on making a fraction out of two of the sides. So again, a triangle has three sides, right? So let's focus on the diagram for a minute here. And let's talk about how sides can be opposite an angle, right? We already know that, right? If you look at the right angle and go opposite the right angle, we should know by now that that thing's called the hypotenuse. So side C in red is called the hypotenuse, all right? Let's talk about what if we were looking at angle A. If we were focused, like let's pretend we're standing here. We're at angle A. The side that is opposite angle A, again, draw an arrow. You get to side BC, or the one that's labeled with the lowercase a, or the one that's in blue, right? So the side that's opposite angle A is considered side A. And if you think about it, we already, again, know what the hypotenuse is. It's the one that's across from the 90-degree angle. And so then the third side that we haven't talked about would be side B. That would be adjacent. So if we're focused here on angle A, the side opposite angle A is the blue side. The side adjacent to angle A is the green side. And the hypotenuse is the red side because it's across from the 90-degree angle. Let's move over to angle B. If we look at angle B and we want to know which side is opposite, again, draw an arrow across the triangle. We would bump into the green side. So that green side is opposite angle B. We, of course, again, know exactly what the hypotenuse is. It's always opposite the right angle, so that's the red side. And then that side we haven't talked about yet, that's our adjacent side. So the blue side would be adjacent to B. So adjacent is a synonym for the word next to. So you want to figure out what side is opposite the angle, what side is next to the angle, and where is your hypotenuse. And we're going to create fractions. We're going to pick two of those sides and create fractions. So which two are we going to pick? How do we know which two to pick out of the three sides? Well, we have these three ratios called the sine ratio, the cosine ratio, and the tangent ratio. And they're trying to tell you which two sides to pick. Are you supposed to pick the opposite, the adjacent, or are you supposed to pick the hypotenuse? And so if you're dealing with the sine ratio, it'll tell you to pick the opposite and the hypotenuse. If you're dealing with the cosine ratio, they want you to pick the side that's adjacent to that angle and the hypotenuse. And if you're dealing with the tangent ratio, you're going to pick the side that's opposite angle A and adjacent to angle A and make a fraction out of those. And I'm not going to go into this table too much more than that. That's a lot of information on that table, and we can revisit that as needed. But really, that's the basics. So if we come down here, it's kind of summarized down here. If we're going to make a fraction out of two of the sides in a right triangle, we have to be told which two sides. And so again, the sine ratio is telling you to take the opposite side over the hypotenuse and make a fraction out of those two sides. The cosine ratio is saying pick the adjacent side and the hypotenuse. And then the tangent ratio is telling you to create a fraction out of the opposite side and the adjacent side. There's this goofy acronym that we'll say a lot in the class. It's called SOHCAHTOA. I'll talk more about that when we're in person, but it's going to be an acronym that helps you remember how to create the fractions. But let's go to the example and actually create them. It's really not that hard. All right, so the sine of A, what that's asking you to do is to pick the opposite leg and put it over the hypotenuse. So I can see in the picture I have three numbers, but I only want to make a fraction out of two, right? Fractions only need a numerator and a denominator. And so we focus on angle A because that's what this A means. So we're going to focus here on angle A, and we're going to figure out that the leg that's opposite, again, just draw that arrow, that would be 40. I just bumped into 40, right? So the leg that's opposite angle A is 40. The hypotenuse will never change. It's always going to be across from the 90-degree angle. And so that's going to be, whoops, sorry about that. That's going to be 41. And that's literally all you're asked to do in today's lesson, is make a fraction out of 2 of the sides. So get a numerator and get a denominator, and you are done. All right, let's try it again. In example 1b, this time it's saying tangent, right? So tangent means take the opposite leg and put it over the adjacent leg. So let's go to that picture and figure out which number is the opposite leg, which number is the adjacent leg. Again, they have to tell you where to look from. So this is angle C. We're looking at angle C. Opposite's always easy. Draw an arrow through the triangle. Way across the triangle, you'll see 21. That's called your opposite, right? We should know that. We've been creating the opposite of the 90 for several lessons. So this is the same thing, but we're opposite angle C this time. The adjacent leg will be the one that is not opposite and not the hypotenuse. So again, the hypotenuse is easy. It's across from the 90. So which one am I not pointing at? I'm not pointing at the 20. That must be the adjacent. So hypotenuse is always across from the 90. When we say opposite leg, we mean across from the angle they gave us. So adjacent is the one that's next to and not opposite. Right? So 21 over 20. All right, we got another sign problem. The sign problem, again, wants the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. It's telling you, find x in the picture. Here's x. Draw an angle, or draw a line through there so you can find your opposite leg. Across from the x is 35. So my opposite leg is 35. And then the hypotenuse is opposite the 90-degree angle. So that's going to be 37. And that's it. Make a fraction out of the 2 sides. You're done. We'll do a few more. In D, it's saying cosine. COS means cosine. And again, if you go back to the notes at the front page, cosine is right here in the middle where I just put a star. It's saying do adjacent leg over hypotenuse. So I'm going to do the adjacent leg, and I'm going to put the hypotenuse in the denominator. So for C, I'm right here at C. The opposite leg would have been 20, right? I want the leg that's not opposite. The one that's adjacent is the one I'm not pointing to, so it's the 21 instead. Hypotenuse is across from the 90, which is 29. And you're done. That's all I'm going to ask you to do today. All right, 2 more. Last 2. Cosine of Z. Again, that's asking you to do the adjacent leg over the hypotenuse. All right, where are we looking? We're at Z, right? So let's go find Z. The opposite leg is 10. Which leg am I not pointing at? Because the opposite and adjacent are different, right? Adjacent's right next to the Z and opposite's way across from it. The one I'm not pointing at is the 24. If they had asked for opposite, I'd do the one I'm pointing at. And the hypotenuse is opposite the 90, which is 26. Now, before I'm not going to box that because in math we should always simplify our fractions. So you really should divide both of these by 2 and not leave it unsimplified, which would make it 12 over 13 instead. So that would be the better way of writing the answer. All right, last one. In F, it says the word tangent. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. Tangent is trying to tell you to do the opposite leg over the adjacent leg. Now remember, the legs are the one making the right angle. So here's A. If we go opposite the A, we bump into the 30. The leg that's not opposite is adjacent, so that's going to be this 16. If we divide top and bottom, again, let's not leave it unsimplified. Let's divide top and bottom by 2. And we would get 15 over 8. So certainly if you box 30 over 16, you'd get most of the points. You'd just maybe lose something for not simplifying your fraction. All right, so that's all you're asked to do is to create fractions by using this kind of little summary here on this page, this real colorful summary. And again, the sign Fraction would be the opposite leg in the numerator, the hypotenuse in the denominator. The cosine fraction, again, fraction and ratio mean the same thing. The cosine fraction would be take the adjacent leg and put it over the hypotenuse. And then the tangent fraction would be take the opposite leg and put it over the adjacent leg and build those fractions.